And then the last one that I wanted to spend a bit of time on is influence. Because I think knowledge mobilization is really an influencer. We are using knowledge to influence. We want to influence. We want to make a difference. We want to get that social action that is in front of us. We want to have cultures of nonviolence and peace. We want this to be moved forward. So how has that happened for us? So because within the movement, the movement being the Red Cross, Red Crescent movement, there became knowledge about the Canadian Red Cross working in this area and also the success we were having in this area. And then they started developing what was Strategy 2020, which would be the strategy that all national societies all around the world in 187 countries would be driving their work from. And so within that and through many meetings, we did two things. Number one, there's three main objectives for Strategy 2020, and we got one objective, is to build cultures of nonviolence and peace. So for the whole world, one objective is that objective. And then we wrote the strategy on violence prevention, mitigation, and response with Geneva, so that then we started moving it into, so that we could start influencing all these national societies all around the world. So we have the framework. We're building the framework for the knowledge that needs to get out there. So that was really critical. And the other piece of influence has been in this last year is predictable and preventable. Because as we have been out in many disaster responses, and as the research, external research, is beginning to trickle in, and it hasn't been much on it, is that we know that this level of violence, of interpersonal violence and self-directed violence, is escalating after each disaster. So we are not providing safety for children and youth after disasters. We have not critically looked at what's needed in there. And when you think of the millions and millions of kids that are impacted by disasters and who are now presently in camps, we have a huge gap in our services. So we wrote an advocacy paper on that, predictable, preventable. And from that advocacy paper, we actually had it launched at Brookings Institute in Washington, who are the disaster gurus, and said, we've never thought about this in disaster. And so it becomes a really critical issue that we are moving forward. But from that level of influence, you also have to have action. So from this action, we're doing two main things. This week, actually, we're going to Kenya. We are coaching the Kenyan Red Cross so that they will go into the Dadaab camp in the Horn of Africa and do an assessment of violence assessment in that camp, and we'll start then putting interventions and knowledge mobilization in there. And secondly, we're developing an apps project so that all humanitarian workers will have on their smartphones, if they're doing water sanitation, these are the questions. How are the toilets built? Are there locks? Are there lights? All that. If they're doing food distribution, these are the questions. So we want people to start thinking, how do we provide safety? How do we protect children and youth in all these situations?